Back in our prayer books now, page 489. O giver of life, our times are in your hand. One generation comes into the world to be blessed with days of peace and safety. Another goes through the valley of the shadow, enduring the cruelties of persecution and war. Heartbreaking have been the times that have fallen to our lot, O God. We have lived through years of tyranny and destruction. We are schooled in sorrow and acquainted with grief. We have seen the just defeated, the innocent driven from their homes, and the righteous suffer a martyrdom as merciless as any ages have witnessed. At this hour of memorial, we recall with grief all your children who have perished through the cruelty of the oppressor, victims of demonic hate, the aged and young, the learned and unlettered, all driven in multitudes along the road of pain and pitiless death. Their very presence on earth was begrudged them, for they brought your covenant of mercy and justice to the recollection of your enemies. They perished because they were a symbol of your eternal law. Their death has brought darkness to the human soul. They lie in nameless graves, in far-off forests and lonely fields, and the substance of many was scattered by the winds to the earth's four corners. Yet they shall not be forgotten. We take them into our hearts and give them a place beside the cherished memories of our own loved ones. They now are ours. Together, we pray to you, O source of mercy. May come to glow with a renewed light in the human soul, that remembering them we may sanctify your name in all the world. Thus will their memory become an enduring blessing to all your children. Friends, this evening, all of us in here together, all of us mourners, all of us touched by the chill of the grave, we are all bound by the prayers of memory into an unenviable fellowship. Yizkor draws all of us, those newly bereaved and those who have grieved for years, together by the task of mourning. All of us members of a club no one wants to join. All of us are here in this room together because we have loved and we have lost. And so there are things that we share, you and I. We share the memory of what it's like for tears to find us at inconvenient times. We know how memory can knock the wind out of you. We know the peculiar feeling of emptiness that remains, like the gap left by a pulled tooth, whose pain and tenderness still catch us off guard, even after the healing that comes from time. Another thing that we share is the experience of having been comforted by others. All of us who have survived loss have stories that we can share about times, perhaps when our grief was freshest, when we received loving care from those who love us. We remember times when kindness was so overpowering we could scarcely believe it. But we also remember times when well-meaning overtures went wrong. Almost all of us, I would bet, have acquaintances or relatives who thought they were being helpful while we mourned. At the Shiva house or at birthdays, at anniversaries or holidays that were difficult for us. They said things that they believed would comfort us, but which wounded us instead. You must be glad she's not suffering anymore. It was just his time to go. Everything happens for a reason. He's in a better place now. I guess God needed her more than we did. They're words that assuredly are more comforting to the person saying them to the one receiving them. We shake our heads and wonder why someone would say these things, or at least I did when I was the mourner that people said them to. And then I was so sad and angry when I encountered a story from our own Jewish tradition offering the same dish of cold comfort to a mourner. The Midrash relates a story about a tragic event in the life of the great 2nd century sage Rabbi Meir. According to the story, 2 of Rabbi Meir's children died in a single day. And so his wife tried to comfort him by telling him a story. She offered the allegory of a precious object that had been loaned out to a trustworthy borrower, but was finally being returned to the keeping of its rightful owner. Imagine if a king had lent the crown jewels to an ordinary subject of the kingdom, she suggested. Certainly it wouldn't be sad or surprising when the king called for the return of the jewels and collected them back to the castle. And so, she concluded, we should be reassured by knowing that just in the same way, God has called for the return of those 2 valuable souls he lent to us. It seems an unusually cruel thing for her to have said to him. To me, it is nearly unthinkable that the rabbi might have been comforted by it, or that any of us, the widowed and the orphaned, those left bereft by the loss of friends, siblings, children, could be relieved by the suggestion that God needed them more than we did. So we have to ask, we Jews who are heirs of the most insightful religious tradition in the world when it comes to working our way through death, Jewish mourning rituals and customs and the expectations it sets out for those left bereaved by death, they are genius. And so for me, there must be a way to make sense of this story. I have to find a way of understanding it despite its emotional tone deafness and despite the troubling implications it makes about God's nature and the mechanics of life and death. I have to, because I believe deeply in Judaism's insight and sensitivity in matters of grief and loss. And so here is one possibility. We all know that there are many names in Judaism for God. On the High Holy Days, of course, God is our Father, our King, who edits the book of life while perched on a heavenly throne. But another dimension of God's identity is that God is the one who remembers. That's how the Bible identifies God when women like Sarah and Hannah, previously unable to conceive, suddenly find themselves pregnant. It's the aspect of God that is awakened when the cries of the Israelites in Egyptian slavery reach God's ears. It's how the Torah reassures us every time the divine presence intervenes in history to set things right in a broken world. God remembered the covenant. And in our Machzor, the liturgy of these high holy days calls God by a special name we don't use any other time during the year. The liturgy calls God Zocher Kol HaNishkachot, the one who remembers all that has been forgotten. By this, it generally means to emphasize that God remembers the things that we've done, our sins and our kindnesses over the past year, that God tallies and assesses them before determining the course of the year ahead. God remembers us. But, more importantly, during this Yizkor service, we should note that God remembers the ones we have lost as well. And this is what helps me make sense of that story told by Rabbi Meir's wife 20 centuries ago. Because if God is the one who remembers what might otherwise be forgotten, I can take small comfort in knowing that those taken from us, those borrowed jewels that must be returned to their owner, will be collected by God as adornments for a crown of memory. Let me be clear, I do not believe that God collects souls for some higher purpose that is concealed from us or for God's own selfish pleasure. For many of us, the jewels in God's crown, beautiful though they may be, are the jewels of plunder, gems that should never have been taken, that still belong here with us. But since they are gone, even if we cannot understand why, we may yet find solace in knowing that our dear ones, our most precious gems, have become jewels in the crown of memory, resting at last in the most rarefied royal chamber of God's presence. God remembers things long forgotten. And at this time of year, we act in imitation of God. We too collect memories, draw them near to us, try to gain warmth from them like coals that still glow after bright flames have gone out. We draw our memories out of the darkness, one by one, our most precious recollections of those now vanished from us. The way they smelled, the way they held us, their favorite things to wear, the way they looked, so that only we could tell that they were feeling tired or mischievous or affectionate. The same old jokes they would tell every time, and the way they would laugh to be generous when we told ours. From the deep wells of memory surface shining fragments of the precious time we spent with them. A song, a pair of shoes, a meal. We cup these things lovingly in our hands and we think, oh, they would have loved this. This is why memory is valuable, and this is why it is holy. Because like God, memory can give life to the dead. Through our memory of those for whom we say Yizkor prayers today, they remain with us. They accompany us in our work or in the good deeds we do that give our life its meaning. They're with us in the things we value or the things we dread. They're with us in our love. And they will stay with us forever because we, too, are Zochrei HaNishkachot, the ones who remember what would otherwise be lost. Our devotion to the work of memory burns hot and bright because it is our last and most enduring kindness to them. It is, in the end, the one thing that is left for us to do for those we loved, those we lost, those we remember. And so, wounded but still standing, still moving forward, still remembering, we partners in the dark fellowship of grief, we hold on to our recollections of the ones we have lost. We bind them into tight, precious bundles. Our memories remain even after we have surrendered those we have lost, returned those shining, precious jewels to be placed in the crown of the one who remembers. And so this Yizkor can offer us a small measure of comfort, can allow the tightness of loss to gently loosen one more notch as our prayers rise to the widest spaces of the universe, upward and outward, coming to rest at last in peace in the vault of eternal memory. We take a moment now for silent reflection.